The Story of an Hour was written by Kate Chopin and it was published in 1894. Despite the story's very short length, it provides such intense while reading and post-reading experiences that it's still relevant today. The story is told through the voice of a third-person narrator. Louise Mallet's husband Brentley is reported dead amongst the casualties of a terrible railroad accident. It is his friend Richards who learns about Brentley's death. Particular care is taken by Richards and Louise's sister Josephine into informing Louise of her husband's death. Louise is known to suffer from heart problems, and as soon as she learns about the catastrophe, the newly widowed wife bursts into tears. She seeks temporary refuge in her sister's arms and then rushes upstairs, as if she could flee the terrible news. She secludes herself and tries to digest the pain away from any onlookers. She can't bridle her tears. She throws herself in an armchair and sits facing a window. Her gaze wanders through the window. She can see treetops quivering at the wind of spring. She can smell the scent of rain in the air she breathes, and she can hear an enthusiastic peddler inviting people to buy what he has to sell. There are sparrows twittering, and she can hear somebody singing from afar. All of this evokes rebirth. None of this betokens sadness. Rain is what breathes life into nature. It is as if everything is celebrating Mrs. Mallet's rebirth. She looks up and notices that although the sky is cloudy, it seems to reclaim many a spot. The clouds look destined to loosen their repression of the sky. Marriage is like the clouds that have suppressed and hidden the radiant sky, and today those clouds are clearing and the sky is emerging anew. Mrs. Mallet seems as startled by this turn of events as us readers, if not more. She hosts an inner struggle between her conscious self and her subconscious self. She has never consciously thought of a marriage as a burden. This is such unthinkable a thought because Brentley has been nothing but a good husband. She says that his face had never looked safe with love upon her. It is the very institution of marriage that is stifling. Mrs. Mallet's inner struggle between an ecstatic subconscious and adequate grief continues, but it is inevitably won by the subconscious. The words free, free, free frantically escape through Mrs. Mallet's mouth. She gives in to the ecstatic relief that was ramping inside her. Then her appearance changes. Every ounce of sadness vacates her face. We're reminded that Brentley has been a loving and a loved husband, but marriage is such a poisonous invention that it tremendously damages people. Philosopher Friedrich Engels writes in The Origins of the Family, Private Property and the State, monogamous marriage comes on the scene as the subjugation of one sex by the other. It announces a struggle between the sexes unknown throughout the whole prehistoric period. Engels and Marx argue that ancient hunter-gatherer societies were not patriarchal. They were matrilineal, where women wielded a lot of power. In hunter-gatherer societies, women's foraging was as important as men's hunting. The transition to patriarchal monogamous families marked the defeat of women at the hands of men. Unaware of her sister's resurrection, Josephine knocks on Louise's door and begs her to stop torturing herself and to get out. Louise tells her sister to go away as Louise is far from torturing herself. She relishes at the thought of spending many years to come free of oppression when her life will be only hers. Only a day ago was Louise cursing her life and wishing for it to be short, as every lived day came with suffering and torture. By all contrast, Mrs. Mallet is now praying for her life to be long. Louise ends up opening the door for her sister. She gets out and they both descend the stairs. Richards, Brentley's friend, is there at the door awaiting the two sisters. Then someone starts to open the door from the outside. The door gets pushed and it's Brentley Mallet who enters. He's unaware of any railroad accident, but he is startled by Josephine's thunderous scream. His friend Richards tries to intervene and to soften the impact of the surprise on Mrs. Mallet, but is not swift enough. As soon as Mrs. Mallet sees the once thought deceased husband, she drops dead. The doctor concludes that her heart has stopped due to a sudden and brutal surge of joy. The reader knows only too well that it is not joy that has killed Mrs. Mallet. It is the bitter thought of going back to oppression after she has had a taste of freedom. Freedom from the shackles of the institution of marriage. Mrs. Mallet's stifling experience with marriage, albeit to a gentle, loving husband, is very perplexing. Feminist philosopher Simone de Beauvoir writes in a book, The Second Sex, "Marriage is the destiny traditionally offered to women by society. This is extremely limiting and does not account for the multiplicity of what women might want to do with their lives." Mrs. Mallet's tragedy could be read as an attempt to expose the meaninglessness of the concept of love. Mrs. Mallet loved her husband and he loved her too. Love forces people to offer a lot of sacrifice. You could alternately trace Mrs. Mallet's suffocating life to society's movement from the countryside to the city. In the countryside, wives and husbands used to work side by side. In the city, however, men have jobs that require them to leave their homes for the whole day and sometimes for days. There is nothing in the story that shows Mrs. Mallet was ill-treated by her husband, but the fact that he is away might suggest it is loneliness that has been causing her pain. There are many readings of Mrs. Mallet's tragedy. Some readings put the blame on her and hold her to be responsible for her own misery as a spoiled bourgeois. There are lots and lots of readings, and if you think there are some other readings that explain the tragedy of Mrs. Mallet and her death, let's discuss them here. It'll be fun. Now this video has reached its end. Until we meet again, have a great day.